Come on, Livingston. We gotta go on and on and on. Together we can make it. We gotta go on and on and on. Come on, Livingston.
Knocks it through. Mullen bursting into the box. Josh Mullen.
Together we can make it.
Mullen's ball across, it's turned in! It's Pittman who's got it! Livingston leads!
Road is long.
Can they get the ball back in? O'Brien.
Lead! And Livingston have the lead!
Man, can score.
If we march together.
The full-time whistle blows and David Hayes celebrates! And the Livingston fans join in exultation.
Come on, Livingston.
Livingston have the lead against Rangers, and they are certainly rising to a few occasions on their return to the top flight in Scotland.
Come on, Livingston. We gotta go.
Hello and welcome back to Talk Livi, the podcast dedicated to everything Livingston Football Club and Scottish football. My name's Euan, and today I'm joined by Angus. Angus, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, doing not too bad. Obviously, a good weekend for us. Also, on a personal note, this will be news to you. I've started playing for the Livingston GS Supporters Club.
No.
2 games in, Euan, 2 goals, 100% record. I've been told that that's actually not good enough. There's a couple of players who, have better than 100% records. So, I've really got to get the finger out. But, yeah, very positive start. And
Now, you say it's news to me, but I actually got a message last Saturday from Cal McKinven, who I know listens to the podcast, and he messaged me and went, by the way, Angus is a bit of a baller. I was like, I just assumed he was down watching Murray's amateurs or whatnot, but no, you turned out for GS, so actually, I already knew, mate. It's all about who you know. But yeah, not bad. Not a bad debut for yourself. Obviously, very good weekend all in then. Men's team won, women's team won, and you're rolling out for GS these days as well. I had a gig had a gig on Sunday night for myself. Went and saw the vaccines at one of my favourite places in the world, the Barrowlands. So yeah, it's been an all-in good weekend. But as always, you can find this episode as well as all our other episodes on your preferred podcast streaming site. Just search for Talk Livi, so follow us or subscribe to ensure that you don't miss another episode.
we'll start the episode off by discussing our victory over Aberdeen as the Lions mauled the sheep in the North East.
With our next opponents being Hibs, we discuss some players and managers who have represented both clubs.
Finally, Euan caught up with Longbangers host Matty Fairnie to get the lowdown on Hibs ahead of this weekend's game.
It was the first of our post-split fixtures as the Lions travelled to Pittodrie to take on Aberdeen. Goals from Nicky Devlin and a Jason Hope penalty secured 3 vital points against the 10-man Dons. I guess it's a big 3 points which should see us safe for the season, but it was certainly a game full of some incidents, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Regarding kind of safety and stuff like that as well, it's massive to, for us to be getting that wee bit closer. It's obviously not mathematically impossible yet, but again, you're looking at there's 4 teams now who have to pick up so many more points and us to pick up none, which seems kind of unlikely. But it seems kind of like the typical Livingston way, doesn't it, Euan? We went so close to getting the top 6 by being unable to hold on to that 2-0 lead against Motherwell. We now go away to Aberdeen, which in all honesty should probably be a tougher game in all kind of aspects, kind of historically a tougher side to play against, a team who we've had not the best of records against. I think we've only won there once in the last, it was like 17 years by the last time that we'd kind of talked about Aberdeen. And then we go up there and, put in such a solid performance and, hold on to the win to give us a massive 3 points. Going into this game, I think we were all kind of the same. I think there was a mild optimism because of, how poor Aberdeen have been this season. I mean, they've absolutely not. They've been a shadow of what they have been for the last 10 odd years, because managerial changes and whatnot. But we always don't really put in the best of performances up there. I mean, the one earlier this season is a good example of that. Went up there and a good start in the first half. I mean, I seen Jim Goodwin coming out following the match and saying about how he wishes he could come out and say that that Livy had played them off the park and they were so much better, and he went off to list off that they had so much more possession and so much more shots on target. But when you actually look at the stats in that, in terms of the shots created and whatnot, I think it was only like 5-4, and then that's also not including a chance that we had where I think it's David Bates almost knocks into his own net. So in there, I think, well, obviously he's got to humour his own fans, but I'm not quite sure where this absolute hammering that we took has come from in his perspective. Going on to the game itself, just kind of a good away performance from us that we've been used to seeing this year. I think probably the biggest kind of talking point from that first half is obviously the famous Max Stryjek incident, which he's now just been handed a 2-match ban, which the club has accepted. Euan, I guess I'll just come to you hear your thoughts on it first. What's your lowdown on the punch that people are now stating it as?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, we're for anyone who was up at Pittodrie, at the opposite end of the ground from the incident, and even if you ask the red tinted glasses boys, the player that was involved in the incident from the Aberdeen perspective was the boy Vicente Bazawin, who has previous against us for a bit of going down easily. So to me, at the time, it looked like Max was trying to play out quick and Bazawin's blocked him off and then he's hit the deck. I said at the time I want to see it again because given who the player was that had hit the deck, but Max is very, very lucky that he wasn't sent off and it was a penalty. It would have been very similar almost to the Io Obelai one at Celtic Park a little bit, but it was just daft from Max. There's absolutely no need for it. And we've definitely got away with one. There's no doubt about it. And the fact he's got a 2-game retrospective ban would suggest that as well. The only thing I'll say is we've had a couple of absolute shocking decisions against us in recent weeks alone. So it's one of those ones, managers always say it, these things balance themselves out over the course of the season. And I think we did maybe get a couple of decisions on Saturday up at Pittodrie that went in our favour, but I felt that was something that we were due given some of the decisions that have gone against us. But yeah, Max is incredibly lucky, especially with the game being at 0-0 at that point. If he gets sent off and they get a penalty, yeah, it's a totally different game. And I can appreciate frustration from an Aberdeen perspective on that one.
I mean, you go back to saying about, how things even themselves out. It's mad to think that, we have that St Johnstone handball, Devlin against Motherwell just there, and the thing we've got a penalty, the thing that, we've kind of got away with is just like the Stryjek one. I was completely going to say about the penalty that we did get there. I've completely just jumped ahead. But again, you go back to the game earlier in the season where Montano got sent off. So I don't think there can be too many complaints in all honesty, because, Aberdeen got one earlier in the season against us, weren't able to capitalise on it. But, at the same time, there was a sending off that we had against them that was, completely not a red card at all. Swings and roundabouts, I guess, for these things. But again, it's just another example of, officiating in Scotland not being great. And I guess that brings up the VAR debate, Euan. Is this another great call for why we should have it in Scotland?
VAR. I've said from the get-go with VAR, see if it's implemented in the fashion that it has been at the last 2 major tournaments, i.e. the Euros and the World Cup. I'm all for it because it's been borderline flawless at those tournaments. If it turns out anything like the Premier League down south, I worry. And don't get me wrong, the referees need all the help they can get, but it's the same officials that are going to be running VAR. That for me, just I can't see it being a fluid process, VAR up here. We'll wait and see. But as you say, if it means that some of these decisions, it's the correct decision getting made at the end of the day, then it's better for every party involved, isn't it? I can see the benefits of it, but I hope that it's implemented in a professional and kind of fluid manner. And you're not. The thing is, like down south, you've got all the big screens everywhere. Livy aren't going to manage to put in a massive screen telling you that there's a disallowed goal for a fingernail being offside and things like that. So, I am for it, but I'm for it if it's implemented in the correct way.
think that's what the weird thing is you've mentioned there, like at other tournaments, it's kind of worked pretty well. And then you go to the league in the world that's got the most coverage. It's probably got the absolute most money in that, and it seems to be such a farce. I've no idea, how that kind of balance is being struck. I don't know if you get this kind of issues everywhere else in the world or that, or if it's just because the English game is the biggest and that. But it's always just a talking point. I don't know if I think that may be a thing for fans as well. Is that going to be something that is going to take away from the game as well? But yeah, I guess we'll see how that goes. But obviously back to the game, we took the lead, and I think it's actually quite a well worked goal from Livingston. There are a lot of instances where we keep on battling to keep the ball alive, making extra stretches, to keep the ball in play and whatnot, anticipating. It was a great tackle by Pittman on Ferguson beforehand, which if he times it any worse, or any later of that, he's probably getting a free kick against him. If it's any higher of that, but he does it tremendously well. The ball goes out to Shinnie, works it in, and Bailey does tremendously well to anticipate the deflection. Very unlucky not to score himself, but yeah, then there's Nicky Devlin there to score for the second time in 2 seasons up at Pittodrie and get us on our way. Yeah, Euan, talk us through it. Absolute scenes when the goal went in.
Oh yeah, scenes from the 60 fans that made the 4-hour trip up to Pittodrie. That's just for you, Glenn, the 4-hour trip up to Pittodrie. But he's a captain, he's a right back. He comes from Bishop Briggs, Nicky Devlin rocking up from the back. Now, as you say, it was really well worked. Right from the corner initially, I think, from Io. And as you say, Pitts keeps the ball alive at the middle of the park, and it works its way out. Shinnie, who I thought, by the way, had a very good game on Saturday, Andrew Shinnie, probably one of his best for us. And, it takes the nick. Bailey's done well to come in off the line. You kind of want your wingers to do. And it's a great save by Joe Lewis, who, you were talking about Jim Goodwin's assessment of the game, and he said, we had more passes, more possession. I never realised Jim Goodwin had become a tiki-taka manager, and it was about passes and possession. But there you go. Just shows you what.
Did that not show at St Mirren like?
No, well, this is what I mean. Clearly, going to a bigger club has his expectations a bit higher. But don't get me wrong, Aberdeen had a lot of the ball first half, and I think Marvin Bartley actually spoke about it after the game, that it was quite a deliberate plan from us to sit off them a little bit. I was a bit uneasy about that because they were playing through us a bit too easily for my liking. I thought we were a little bit passive in the first kind of 15 minutes or so. But I think as the half wore on, we worked our way into it. And yes, Aberdeen had chances, but it was all kind of shots from the edge of the box, maybe. Nothing, I would say, really clear cut. I think McCrory had a header in the build up to that Max Stryjek incident, which Max kind of comfortably saves. But, as you say, Bates almost turned it into his own net. And Bailey's had the header prior to Devlin rocking up and slotting it away. And I think we were, as I say, at that point, we were growing into the game. And I think we did very well to go in ahead at half-time. Have to say, also another talking point prior to the game was Davy Martindale was in hospital. Obviously, best wishes to Davy. Hopefully he makes a speedy recovery. But it's not a bad debut for Neil Hastings, is it, in the dugout, going up to Pittodrie and getting 3 points. So well done to Neil on that. But kind of looking towards the second half, I would say it was much the same. I think Aberdeen had a lot of the ball, but I wouldn't say they created anything really clear cut. Max had a couple of saves to make, one from McKenzie. I think he made one from Bazawin. Johnny Hayes had an effort which went over the bar, but they're all from the edge of the box. I wouldn't say it's clear cut opportunities, but then we've ended up getting the penalty. Again, I think it's brilliant play by us initially. Nubley, who again I thought was superb as the number 9. In fact, the front three in general I thought were very good. Shinnie, Nubley and Bailey I thought had a very good game. I think we did tweak our shape ever so slightly. I think Pitts was playing a lot further forward on Saturday. I think we were almost playing a 4-2-3-1 rather than a typical 4-3-3 that we've played a lot this season. So Pitts was pushed a lot further forward, and I think that helped as well, getting a bit more bodies in and around Nubley. But yeah, it's great play by Nubley to start with. Plays it into Bailey. Bailey plays that pass in between the centre half and the full back, and the penalty's soft is the best way I can put it. The penalty's soft. It's a bit like the one Shinnie got at Tannadice earlier in the season. I think he's used his experience. He's got his body in front of Ojo, and I've been in that position when when I played and I was a winger, if you get your body across the man and you're in the box, the defender's running the risk. If he clips you, it's a penalty, or he needs to leave you. And I think, yes, the contact's probably minimal, but I think Shinnie's used his experience to get in front of Ojo, and he's won the penalty. Jason Holt steps up for it, and don't get me wrong, when I saw that ball hit rise off the ground, not going to lie, I just about shat myself. I always get the fear when I see a penalty go high, but luckily it's clipped the underside of the bar, and it's a perfect penalty, to be honest, from Holty, and that's his first goal of the season. And I think if you were to ask any Livy fan, a player that deserves a goal, it would have been Jason Holt for some of the performances he's put in this season. But I have to say, we classic Livy style. We had a chance from Pittman just after that where he's lobbed it wide, and we had to make it difficult for ourselves, especially after McCrory got sent off for a second yellow. And by the way, I don't think there's been a lot of coverage about the 2 yellow cards, but his first yellow, I actually think Odin Bailey helps him out by jumping away from the challenge, because I tell you what, if he makes contact, I think that's an amber. It's a 50-50 whether it's a yellow or a red card if McCrory makes contact with Bailey. So I think Odin Bailey's actually helped him out.
I think if Bailey goes down and rolls about as well, like that could help influence the referee to give it straight away. Absolutely fair play to Odin for not making a meal out of it, essentially.
Yeah. So McCrory's obviously sent off, and you're thinking, God, can this day get any better? And then bit of lax defending from Io. He's let the ball bounce, and it's a clear penalty on challenge on Ferguson. He's pulled him back, clear penalty, and Ferguson scored. And all of a sudden, it's proven to be stoppage time proved to be a lot more nervy than we were anticipating. But again, I think we were very professional in defending our box for the last few minutes. And as you say, it's the best way you can put it is it's almost as complete of a away performance as you could ask for, isn't it? Just about, when we've had opportunities, we've been ruthless, we've taken them, and for the most part, we've defended our half of the pitch, our box, very, very well, which is what Davey was very critical about in terms of the Motherwell game, especially with the late goal that we conceded. We need to defend our box better. So it's a great result. It puts us 10 clear of St Johnstone. St Johnstone aren't going to turn over 10 points in 4 games. It's, given they've only won 7 games this season, I can't see them then going and, winning 4 on the bounce and us not picking up a single point. So I think that is safety for me. Might not be mathematical, but that's that guaranteed for me. And I think we can look at trying building a little bit of momentum going into the end of the season, because that's our first post-split win since 2006. Granted, we weren't in the league for a number of years, and we had a season where we didn't actually play any split games. But it's a good way to start off these fixtures, and as I say, hopefully building a little bit of momentum going into the new season.
I think when the fixtures came out, I think we were maybe a wee bit wary because we're essentially facing the 2 biggest sides in the first 2 games of the split. Away to Aberdeen, if you had a bad performance up there or a bad result there, the pressure would be on slightly, and we would maybe, like, the positivity around the club that there probably is right now wouldn't be there. Then going into another game against Hibs, another kind of big team, there would be more pressure added onto it. And I know that they've not been in great form recently as well, but again, they're a team who you expect to have like certain qualities and can turn up on a day and pull out a result, but it just makes the whole kind of atmosphere around the club a lot more comfortable in that as well. Something as well that I just think that just boosts the club massively is in this kind of a victory. The 2 goal scorers, Devlin and Holt, I always feel like a game where you win, where your 2 goal scorers are 2 people who are, not usually on the score sheet or that, and 2 people who, the fans have quite a lot of appreciation for, who do all the kind of dirty work. I feel like you appreciate it a lot more. I don't know if that makes much sense or that, but there's an extra wee bit of pride in it where it's, it's those kind of players who, are not naturally doing it. Not saying that we don't appreciate the ones who, scoring week in, week out and everything like that, but yeah, it's just when those collector's items come up, it seems a lot sweeter. And I think, Jason Holt, absolutely perfectly encapsulates that. He's deserved a goal all this season, but especially with the amount of times that he's went close as well. Going into this game at the weekend, I think there's a lot to be positive about, especially from that performance overall. And hopefully, we can continue that on and, get another another 3 points that will mathematically keep us definitely in the league for next season.
Yeah, I agree with you. Obviously, we're biased. We sponsor Nicky on the podcast, so we obviously have a bit of a love for Nicky. But in general, about his performance, I think there were so many genuinely good performances from individuals, and I think Nicky was one of them. He was up against the boy Bazawin for a lot of the game, and I think he handled him brilliantly. As I mentioned already, I think Holty had a good game, but our front three almost, our two wide players and Newbley was an absolute handful. And I thought after the Motherwell game, it would have made sense to play him as a number 9. We kind of spoke about it because of his physicality. Aberdeen's a bit similar. You're going to be under pressure. They're going to have a lot of the ball, so you're going to need to have an out ball that can get you up the park, and Newbley did that absolutely perfectly. And as I say, I thought Andrew Shinnie had probably, I'd argue, one of his best games for us since joining the club. He was excellent on the left-hand side. Again, he's used to the ball and things like that. He showed a lot of experience when we did get possession, and I thought Odin looked really bright as well at times. I love watching Odin Bailey. I think he's a terrific footballer, really classy winger. As I said a couple of weeks back, he's got a bright future ahead of him when he goes back down to south to Birmingham. But there was just so many very good performances from the side, and as I say, it's just a perfect away performance, and it gives us, given the disappointment of missing out on the top 6 in the manner that we did, it's a perfect way to bounce back, and it shows the resilience of this team. They don't tend to let things linger over them too much, and they do tend to bounce back quite well. So perfect way to do it, and go on to Hibs and hopefully can, as you say, make it mathematically safe for another season in the top flight.
With our next opponents being Hibs, we thought we'd discuss some players and managers who have represented both clubs. Euan, there seems like a really obvious one to mention first, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Mark Libra, unbelievable. Stuart Lovell, how could you not start this section without talking about captain, leader, legend that is Stuart Lovell? I mean, I think he was very popular at Hibs. Obviously, we spoke to Stuart earlier in the season, and he had 3 successful seasons at Hibs. Won the first division with them in his first season, and they finished 3rd and also got a Scottish Cup final. But he was unfortunately left out, the Hibs team, for the Scottish Cup final. They actually beat Livi in the semi-final as well that year, beat us 3-0 at Hampden, and then decided to join us when we got promoted, and it was a match made in heaven for the most part. Stuart was given the armband early doors. Some of the stories he tells about working with the likes of Jim Leishman and Davy Hayes, fantastic. And I remember chatting to him. I couldn't take a smile off my face just listening to him talking about what I think any Livy fan would deem as the glory days in the club's history. But he produced some wonderful moments. I think the overhead kick against Rangers. I mean, I still love, and I still watch it about 20 times when it comes up on ASPFL every now and then, when they do something on Australia Day or classic overhead kicks or last minute winners and things like that. That one gets reeled out all the time, and I still take satisfaction in watching it every single time. Is it up there with probably one of the best goals in Livy's history? I think it makes the top 5, certainly.
I think it's got to be, in terms of how massive a result it was, and I think you always have to kind of take into consideration as well, the quality of the goal. I don't know, is there anything that, I can't really think of anything, that is nearly as acrobatic or, comes kind of nearly as close as that. I mean, there's goals that are important. Is there anything that has quite that double factor of, it's a beautiful goal and it's a very important one as well?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, that played a massive part in us qualifying, finishing 3rd in the league that year and qualifying for the UEFA Cup. So it was a massive goal in the context of our season as well. But he scored a goal in European football for Livy away in Sturm Graz, albeit lost the game 5-2 as well. Again, that was an absolute thunder bastard of a strike from about 25 yards from Stuart. So he kind of specialised in a pretty special goal every now and then. But to kind of talk about, again, going back to when I spoke to him, And I mean, this is a good number of years after Stuart's retired from football, but you can see why he made a good captain, because you can, when he talks, you listen, and given the circumstances of the season we won the League Cup when the club was in administration and things like that, as captain, he took a pay cut. He was one of the players that took a pay cut and stayed there and helped the team achieve the biggest thing the club's ever achieved, which was the League Cup. The most famous day, and thoroughly enough, it was against Hibs. I think the poeticness of that, and Stuart was man of the match in the game, and he was excellent that day. He was absolutely everywhere across the park, and unfortunately his time at the club kind of came to a bit of a sour ending when he left. He kind of had a fallout with the owners at the time, Pierce Lynn. I think again Stuart spoke about it it was a newspaper article that he kind of questioned the ownership of the football club, and it's a shame that someone that had such a glittering spell at the club that came to such an end. But I know Stuart's involved with the youth foundation. He's seen about the stadium every now and then. He started up one of the camps for Street Soccer Scotland, who he works with now in Livingston as well. So he's still seen about the club, which is good that he does still have and maintain that connection with the club. But I mean, in my opinion, he's one of the icons of our football club in our relatively short history.
You won't get anybody disagreeing with that at all. Such a key part of that kind of early 2000s team. The only Livy captain, to lift like a major kind of honour as well. Terrific servant, and it's good to see him, kind of poking around the club and that again. There is also another very obvious one, I think, in terms of the Livingston Hibs connection, and it's a current one. It's our assistant manager Marvin Bartley. Obviously another player. He was part of the squad that won the Scottish Cup for them, ending that over 100-year hoodoo. Came to us, and I think that's probably one of the few signings that we've done where we've taken like a player like a established player from one of like the kind of bigger sides, and it's worked out very, very well for us. He came in and he added even more steel to to the midfield and the back line, and as well as a host of leadership abilities. He came in obviously the season that Alan Lithgow had been appointed captain, and then his injuries and kind of illnesses hindered him, so Bartley took over the mantle. And again, in terms of like modern captains and that for Livy, Bartley will be regarded as one of the better ones as well. Getting us to a cup final, top 6 finishes and whatnot, and then obviously now he's taking a bit of a backseat role. Would have been nice to have seen him a part of this season. That maybe who knows, in the last kind of couple of games, will Davy give him that kind of swan song kind of game, let him get the final run out.
I don't know. I don't think Marv would agree with that. I don't think Marv would be up to it now. He's not played in that long. But no, I mean, Marv's been an exceptional bit of business in terms of you look at it. And 6 months after he signed for us, every Hibs fan was crying out saying, "Why did we let Marvin go? He's exactly the type of player that we're missing." And I think, see when opposition fans talk about that, it makes it all the sweeter that we had Marvin. But early doors, again, you go to that leadership quality with Marvin, and you knew fine well at some point he would end up with the armband on, and he did last season. He was appointed captain, as you say, led us to our second major cup final in our history. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be on the day.
What do you think of Marvin as a marauding left winger, by the way?
Don't. I hate to think about it. The thing, do you want to know the thing I'll say? And this will probably get slated by folk that listen to us, but Marvin actually did his job that day. In all honesty, he did his job, which was to take Rooney out the game, because Rooney scored from a dead ball. Wasn't open play, did nothing in open play. So Marv did do his job to an extent. Unfortunately, I think it had a bigger impact on the team kind of across the board in terms of the balance of the team on the day. But Marvin's had some good moments as well. He's another overhead kick. Overhead kick.
They keep on signing midfielders to Hibs. Watch this, Omilonga's going to score an absolute worldie.
The overhead kick again, the poeticness that it was at Tynecastle, and Marv's running about the pitch doing a Ric Flair, just whooping as he's running about the park. It was absolutely brilliant when he did that. But to talk about Marvin, obviously, footballer, he's been excellent. But off the pitch as well, he's been a great ambassador for the football club, I think, in terms of how he's conducted himself. I know he's involved with the SFA now in terms of being an equality advisor, and he's really embraced that role. And again, it shows the leadership qualities of Marvin, because when he talks, you listen. Very much like Stuart Lovell, I think they're much of a muchness in terms of their personalities and their leadership qualities, and two very similar players that have come from Hibs when they've maybe fallen out of favour a little bit and have come to Livi and resurrected their career a little bit. And it's both of them certainly were a match made in heaven. And I know Davey speaks very highly of Marv as a coach as well, and he's obviously been in the dugout this season. He was suspended at the weekend because I believe he got I think he had some words with Kevin Clancy after the penalty that wasn't given at McDermott Park, which I'm not going to lie, if I was in there, I'd probably do the exact same. So I've got nothing against that, Marvin. So, but yeah, it's been a match made in heaven, and I'm sure Hibs fans, both Stuart Lovell, Marvin Bartley, I'm pretty sure Hibs fans would speak very highly of them as well. But I'm going to go off maybe the obvious ones now. I'm going to give you Paul Dalglish as somebody now. Paul Dalglish was a bizarre one. It was the season we got relegated from the top flight, and it was a pretty desperate state of affairs. And Paul Dalglish had a decent enough career. He'd been on the books at Liverpool and Celtic as a youngster. I don't know how much of that was down to his very famous dad, Kenny Dalglish, but he'd been 2 years without kicking a ball. He decided to kind of retire from football. He was essentially doing what Tubes does on Soccer AM, which was doing interviews of footballers, and then all of a sudden he pops up at Livingston. Out the blue, Paul Lambert signs him. I still remember his debut. It was a League Cup tie at Starks Park against Wraith Rovers. Wraith Rovers were in the second division at the time. We were 1-0 down as well at half time. And Paul Dalglish played the game and scored on his debut. Put us 2-1 up, scored the winner that night. One of the very rare highlights of the season. But he produced a couple of big goals that season. He scored the winner in our first league win of the season, which I think was beginning in November. But it was an unbelievable goal. If anyone does remember it, at East End Park, where he picked the ball up on the left-hand side, cut inside, and he's hit an absolute rasper from about 30 yards into the opposite top corner. It was an unbelievable goal. And I remember him scoring an equaliser at Celtic Park. Of course, we lost the game at Celtic Park. Celtic scored in like the 119th minute or something like that, because all the stoppage time they get when you're level at those places. But yeah, he ended up getting a move to Hibs out of it, that short spell that he had with us. So he'd obviously done something right. But I don't think it was a match made in heaven, quite like some of the players we've just spoke about. It wasn't a particularly successful spell for him at Hibs. I think he then went out to America. He came back to Scotland. He was playing with Kilmarnock. But I believe he's out managing now in the States. He has been for a number of years, and I think he's made quite a good fist of it. I think he's in Miami just now. But he's had a number of kind of managerial and coaching roles over there. So it's obviously that lifestyle suiting him very much. But that's a wee bit more of a random one for you, Angus.
I can't say I have many memories of Paul Dalglish, in all honesty with you. I think I would have been quite young at the time. Another player, nepotism kind of strikes hard. I mean, I had no idea that he hadn't played for 2 years or so before he came up. That just explains kind of where the club was at that kind of time. But obviously, you've mentioned, Matt, like about how it's not as much of a match in heaven. I'm going to have to outdo you there with one, Euan. I'm not going to lie to you.
Oh, hit me.
I want you to tell me what your favourite memory of Anthony Stokes was.
Anthony Stokes, well played. Can you actually? I think it's actually say like anything about it. Like you actually can't say anything about him at Livingston, can you?
Well, I'm not going to lie, Euan. Unless we've got some intel on, the training sessions that that he took a part in, I think it is going to be quite difficult for us to comment on Anthony Stokes' time at the club. I remember hearing that when that came through, there was a wee bit of mild optimism, I think, from people that were like, oh, cool, like obviously knowing, kind of what he did, for like Hibs and even like Celtic in big games and stuff like that. And, the Scottish Cup win that they got was probably the prime example of that, where he scored 2 goals. But yeah, 2 weeks later or so, and he's out of the club. Completely bizarre circumstances. Usually with these kind of players, you'd expect it, maybe even get like half a season out of them or that before something happens and they disappear. Nah, 2 weeks, couldn't be bored. It's like he showed up for just, kind of like a retail job or that, did like the training, and he was like, nah, this isn't quite for me. And you never seen him again. Couldn't tell you what he's done since. That's definitely one that, Hibs fans will have much better memories of than we will, for sure, I would say.
I think that's a pretty accurate assessment.
I mean, I don't want to be controversial or anything.
No, I mean, Stokes had three spells at Hibs, didn't he? His first spell obviously resulted in him getting a big move to Celtic, and then he had that spell back at Hibs where he scored 2 in the Scottish Cup final. So I'm sure if you ask any Hibs fans, they'll have pretty fond memories of him. But I think he was a bit of a handful off the pitch, would maybe be the best way to describe Anthony Stokes. And at the time when we signed him, I think we were actually bottom of the league last season when we signed him. Dykes had just gone. And I remember when we announced it, there was a bit of me, a bit like you, there was a mild optimism. You're kind of going, there's a 75% chance this signing doesn't work. But that 25% gamble, if you could get an Anthony Stokes that could replicate what he was doing, even partially what he was doing at Hibs and Celtic, kind of back in his prime, then it could have been double figures for us that season in terms of goals, but it just didn't work. I mean, I think he played half a bounce game behind closed doors. Unfortunately, it was behind closed doors. None of us know how good Anthony Stokes was in that 45 minutes. But
hopefully we can get a player on the podcast at some time who can shed light on this, because I'm sure everybody's dying to know just how good he was. I want to hear all the ins and out analysis of every touch that he made and whatnot during his time at the club. Anthony Stokes, what a servant! I think the writing was on the wall, because I remember Open Goal, Simon Ferry podcast, and that they were talking about it, and I think Simon Ferry made the outlandish claim that Anthony Stokes is better than Lyndon Dykes.
Yes,
and I don't want to say that history's proven him wrong, but I think the career trajectories have went a wee bit opposite directions here. But who knows? Maybe that half a bounce game was entirely worth it. We'll hopefully find out soon.
Oh dear, but yeah, you've kind of talked from Paul Dalglish on that one. Paul Dalglish at least scored a goal for Livingston and made an appearance. So there you go. But I'm going to speak about a manager now, and he's one that with Livy fans is definitely split opinion, which was John Hughes, affectionately known as Yogi. Yogi came in after Gary Boland was sacked. If you ask any Livy fan, very, very fond memories of Gary, and he'd been very successful in his time in terms of getting us back to the first division at that point. And Yogi came in, and John Collins, another connection actually with Hibs, came in as director of football when Yogi came in. And I remember his first game in charge. I think we beat Raith Rovers 4-0. Played some absolutely scintillating football that day. And I know Yogi's teams, he's very much a philosophy manager, isn't he? He wants teams to play a certain type of football, and you kind of thought, right, we're going to play an attractive brand of football, but we got some interesting results under Yogi. It would be hit or miss kind of tail end of that season. I remember going away to Falkirk and winning 5-2. Rory Bolden came out of nowhere and scored a couple of goals. He'd been in the dark for about 3 months at Livingston, and then all of a sudden went in this run where he scored like 12 goals in 9 games or something at the end of that season. Ridiculous. But, the start of the following season was some of the games, at the start of that campaign, it was like watching paint dry. It was really tough to watch in terms of this transition of playing ultimate football and out from the back. And there was some really, really difficult games to watch. I'm all for playing total football, but sometimes you need to bear in mind the players that you've got at your disposal. And Yogi then fell out with a big fan's favourite in Bobby Barr. If any of you want to go and listen back to the Bobby Barr interview, Bobby's memories of Yogi are not great, but there's a lot of players I've spoke to on the podcast that loved working with Yogi, talking about he's one of the best coaches they've worked with in terms on the training pitch, and I can get that. But Bobby was obviously an exception to some of those players that we spoke about, and Yogi then left after 9 months and took his dream job at Hartlepool United. I remember him describing it as his dream job, and I don't think he saw out the season at Hartlepool, so his dream job didn't last him too long. But yeah, Yogi's one that definitely divides opinion, I think, with Livi fans. And at Hibs, he was obviously a player at Hibs, and I think he had a very successful debut season at Hibs in terms of finishing third or fourth in the league, maybe. But again, the wheels came off the following season for him, unfortunately, and he split opinion for me. Certainly.
I think he's one who still kind of splits opinion in Scottish football as a whole as well, because whenever any job comes up, like kind of, and even in the top flight to teams, out with of, kind of, the bigger kind of five side, your Celtic, Rangers, Hearts, Hibs, and Aberdeen, he's always kind of linked, and you always see people being like, oh yeah, he should get like a chance like here or that. And again, go back to the Simon Ferry podcast and that as well. They're massive advocates of him every time, and I think it is because of that, perceived style of play that he's supposed to have and everything like that. But see, when you're taking control of, smaller kind of teams in Scotland and that, I don't think that kind of style of play, you can really kind of get away with. And I don't think he's been as massive a success that, you can kind of justify, kind of linking him with every kind of job in that. I think it was at Ross County his last tenure was. Yeah, the tail end of, was it last season they kept him up?
Yeah, I mean, he kept Ross County up last year, which I think was a good job that he did there, to be fair to him, given the position he took over. And he's at Dunfermline just now, and they look like they're going to perform the Great Escape under him in terms of their form in the last kind of quarter of the season. But I mean, Yogi's best spells, I would say, Falkirk, he was very successful at Falkirk, and one of my close friends, a Falkirk fan, and he absolutely adores Yogi from his time at Falkirk. But even at Falkirk, he split opinion. There's fans that didn't really take to him there. But Falkirk did play a very good brand of football under Yogi, I must admit, if Gordon is listening in. And then Inverness is another one where he's had an incredibly successful spell winning the Scottish Cup and taking them into Europe. Taking a club like Inverness and doing that again, his team played some very good football. So when it works with him, there's no denying that it is very good to watch. And there was instances at Livingston that, as I say, there's a couple of performances I vividly remember under Yogi being some of the absolutely scintillating football that we played. But it was when it worked, and when it didn't work, it was difficult to watch.
Now you mentioned it, completely forgot the Scottish Cup, with Inverness and that, which is a massive achievement. I think it's maybe kind of that thing, I think Hibs are actually going through it right now where, it's that brand of, you want to be playing attractive football, but if you're also not picking up as many points as you probably should as well, like, does that really kind of counteract it? I think that's something that's kind of always going to, it's a Hibs problem right now, as I'm seeing that a lot of people are talking about, certain styles of play, but, whenever, Jack Ross had kind of had them, kind of sitting in kind of decent points, it was not to do with that. So, yeah, I think that kind of, the managers kind of like that, like John Hughes, are always going to kind of split opinions within supporters because, I think we always want a wee bit more, from everything, a wee bit too greedy at times. But I guess I'll take another one, for Livingston Hibs connections. It's not as much of an obscure one, but somebody who I thought, impressed in his time at Livy, and is somebody I would have liked to have seen us keep on for a wee bit longer, especially the season that happened. It was the season that we got relegated to League One following that game against Stranraer. And I actually really thought Sam Stanton was a decent player when he played for us. And whenever we got relegated into League One and, that rebuild was coming, he was somebody I was like, oh, like, he showed enough, in that kind of battle of the relegation kind of time, that, I would like to have seen more from him. Obviously, it didn't work out. And then, we only went up from there. I always just remember in that kind of season, thinking that Stanton was one of the, the brighter aspects of it. Don't know if that's quite as shared, but, I remember a couple of, I think, away games, I think there was a game against Morton that we lost, I think, that he shined. And I think there was a 2-1 victory against Falkirk, I think, that he might have had quite an inspired performance against as well. Although it ended up in vain, I thought, from a lone player, it was exactly, kind of what you wanted to see from a player trying to, build his career.
Yeah, I mean, that season you're talking about, it wasn't difficult to be a highlight in amongst it, was it?
Yeah.
It's a bit like Paul Dalglish's tenure. It wasn't difficult. But No, I mean Stanton came in. I thought when we signed him, it was a very good bit of business. He'd obviously had a decent start to his time at Hibs and kind of fell off the radar a little bit there, but came to us on loan. And those two games that you mentioned are two games I do particularly remember. I think he set up Jordan White at Capello in the game that you're referring to. The first 45 minutes, he was excellent. And the game at Falkirk, he scored a terrific winner down in front of us in the away end. That game ended, it was batshit crazy, the end of that game. So we'd got battered for best part of 75 minutes and then went 1-0 up. I think it was Jordan White that scored, but it was 1-0 up, and then Stanton scored in like the 90th minute, and you thought, yes, get in there, 3 points coming home. And then Falkirk managed to pull one back about a minute later, and then Jacko gave away a penalty, got sent off. And you're thinking, oh my God, this just sums up our season in general. We're 2-0 up away from home, we're literally going into stoppage time, and somehow they've got a penalty to equalise. But I think it was Matt McCallum was in goals and managed to save the penalties from John Baird, so managed to escape there with 3 points in the end. But I just remember that last 5 minutes being utterly batshit crazy. But no, Stanton was one that probably came out with pass marks in his time that season. But sometimes you when you're in a bit of a scrap, he's maybe not the type of player you need at that time. You need grafters and things like that. And I don't think he was maybe that. He was one of the ones that didn't work out for him in the end. I couldn't even tell you where Sam Stanton is these days. I remember he had a spell. He had a spell at Dundee United after he left Hibs as well. Yeah, he was a decent enough player, but his highlights with Livingston are few, I would say. But he was also in what I can only describe as arguably one of the worst teams in our history. No disrespect to any of the guys that are still at the football club you're still here for a reason these days. But there was some, I mean, to put in perspective, some of the players we had that season: Spaz Georgiev, Hugo Faria. Despite having an unbelievable second half of the season the year before, Darren Cole, fell off a cliff essentially that season. So that I think there's a number of these guys that actually made, when we first started Talk Livi, me and Andy made our dud 11, which I think which says a lot about kind of that season as a whole.
I don't want to think about that season anymore, to be fair. But
I maintain I think that season is arguably one of the best things that's happened to us, though, in terms of getting relegated, because then look at the upward trajectory since then. It's been nothing but positive, hasn't it? So it's worked for us in the end. We'll put it like that. But no, there's a number of players that have obviously represented both clubs over the years. Well, we'll post up during the week, but let us know your thoughts on it as well. Any players that we've not mentioned, any players that spring to mind, good or bad, we're happy to hear both. It's always good interaction. So let's hear your thoughts later in the week. So I'm delighted to welcome Matty Fairnie from the Longbangers podcast back on to Talk Livi. How you doing, Matty?
Good, Euan. Yes, thanks very much for having me back on.
No, it's a privilege to have you back on, but it seems to be a common theme when I've had fans back on this season. A lot seems to have happened since we got you on last time. You've had a change in manager again. Maloney had just come in the door when we last played you at Easter Road, and he's since been sacked after 120 days in the job. What went wrong for him, Matty?
Probably easier to list what went right. I reckon how long your podcast goes on for. What went wrong is quite an interesting question. I think he just never really got his ideas across to the players. There are stories of some of the more experienced players stopping training and just asking them, listen, what are you actually asking us to do here? And he just never really got a tune out the team. I think we had 2 wins when he first came in. That it's fortunate we got them, because otherwise we'd be in big bother just now. But after that, we never really looked much like winning games of football.
Yes, obviously he came in with an idea, a philosophy, wanted to play a certain brand of football. Is it one of those things for, he's an inexperienced manager, is it more a case, go and just get results at the start and then try and filter in your philosophy and maybe work on that pre-season? Do you think that's maybe where it's kind of gone wrong for him as well?
it's a decent shout. I think that should have been his starting point, was how they win games. I kind of get it. We've talked about it on Longbangers about do you stick with your guns and believe in what you're doing and see it through, or do you take a more pragmatic approach and say, ditch that just now, like you say, we'll work on it in pre-season. The problem with doing that is the players will never buy into what you wanted to do, because they look at you and say, well, you don't believe in it, because if you believed in it, you would carry on doing it. And I just don't think he was good enough at getting those ideas across to the players. I think it was too complicated what he was trying to do, or, football was an easy game at its heart, and I think he overcomplicated it. Happened with Paul Heckingbottom as well when he was in charge. He had like these great coaching ideas about setting traps for, that's what they talk about, how to beat the press, and we'll set traps for a team here. Then you come up against Hamilton and they shell the ball from one end to the other. Like, you can't set a trap against that because they just miss out their defence and their midfield. A bit harsh on Hamilton, but pick a team, it's Scottish football, that's what happens.
We spoke about it last time. There's a difference between working with Kevin De Bruyne and a Jake Doyle-Hayes, for example. It's a massive gulf in the quality, and as you say, sometimes you maybe just need to take that little bit more of a pragmatic approach. But our own manager has actually been linked with the vacancy, albeit Davy quite abruptly knocked it back in the presser last week. But who would you like to see in the hot seat for next season? Obviously, David Gray's got the gig till the end of the campaign.
Well, I kind of nailed my colours firmly to the Roy Keane mast last night when we recorded. It's just one of these mental things that came out that he'd expressed an interest. You don't know how much it's paper talk. I would imagine probably 99.9% of it is paper talk, and it's never ever going to happen. But I just love the idea of having an absolute lunatic in charge. I think we probably won't get any better, but boy, it'll be fun. So Roy Keane at the moment stands as my first pick. After that, I'm struggling for a name for somebody who would be realistic, and because there's nobody in Scottish football that jumps out. And I know there's like a kind of inherent snobbery here for Hibs fans that will turn their nose up at, like, say, Derek McInnes or David Martindale, or Callum Davidson's been rubbish this season anyway. Excuse the language. So he probably wouldn't have done himself. Had he been last season on the back of a double, Hibs fans would still have turned their nose up at Callum Davidson because of the way that St Johnstone play. So I don't know how you find somebody that ticks all those boxes. You need like Harry Potter to come in and wave a magic wand and identify somebody, because there's just nobody jumps out. It's all sort of either folk who have been round the houses and are so like unimaginative appointments that folk will be like, no, get behind them, or you've got somebody who could be really divisive, like Malky Mackay. Like Hibs would not get behind Malky Mackay for the number of reasons, like the obvious ones, because his history. Yeah. But there are some who say, deserve second chance. He's done well with Ross County, and there's probably an argument there for that. But Hibs don't need a divisive manager at the moment. They need somebody that can get everybody behind them.
Yes, it's one of those things, because when Maloney came in the door and he was promising this brand of football, I know a lot of my pals who are Hibs fans, they're very particular about the way that Hibs play, or they want a Hibs team to play. So you kind of thought, this might work kind of long term if he was given a bit of time. But obviously that wasn't given. So it is one of those things. There's not obvious names that really stick out. But tell you what, it would sum up Scottish football if Roy Keane came in, wouldn't it?
Just for the banter, you look at the impact Stevie Gerrard had at Rangers. Rangers are already a big club, but he raised their profile even further. And I think Roy Keane would have that lift in Scottish football as well. Come in, he'd instantly be the biggest personality in Scottish football if he came in. Like immediately, would take that role, and then just strap yourself in and wait for the fireworks, I think.
Well, our club secretary is obviously going to Hibs as the football ops manager for next season. So, I mean, he's dealt with Davy Martindale, so I'm sure Roy Keane will be a bit of a pussycat in comparison to him. But with the win against St Mirren just there at the weekend, a bit like ourselves, you've kind of put to bed that lingering potential playoff, getting dragged into that. What is the aim for Hibs? Just try and finish best of the rest, 7th is the realistic target then, I take it, for the remainder of the season?
I think so, yeah. We talked on Longbangers about the similarities between this season and the season we went down under Terry Butcher. And the first game we had post-split that season was St Mirren. And St Mirren scored after like 30 seconds or something and then won the game, and the rest is history. We went down. We won this time, and that probably gave us the points that we need to be safe. So now I think we can play without looking over our shoulder too much. I'm not sure what sequence of results would have to happen to drag us into it, but I'm not sure it's possible for either Livingston or Hibs to get pulled in, because if St Johnstone win them all, then Aberdeen can't win all their games and they're on lower points than us already. And so, they're more at risk than us. So I think, 7th, and just get to the end of the season. If we get no more injuries, that would be a success, because we seem to be losing 2 or 3 players a game at the minute.
Yeah, it's the same for us. Obviously, our start to the season, I think if you asked any Livy fan after 8 games when we only had 4 points, I think any Livy fan would have bitten your hand off for 7th place. But obviously, just the circumstances in which it happened, a bit like yourselves, it's Hearts that have done it to you, isn't it? And then obviously the cup semi-final defeat's making it quite a deflated end to the season, isn't it?
I could see this season far enough. It was funny because folk were talking about writing the season off. I can't remember what game it was. Maybe Dundee United, when we drew with Dundee United at Easter Road, and top 6, we needed something at Tynecastle to get top 6. And folk were saying, just write the season off. And there was loads of us going, don't be stupid. And actually, probably should have just written it off at that point. Just been just to matter. Whatever happens. We'll just limp through to the end of the season.
I never realised, like, I mind we had an interview with Stephen Lawless, and he was talking about when he was at Partick Thistle, and he was like, I'm not going to tell my grandkids about finishing in the top 6. So I never ever thought I would be so distraught after a game of football that we didn't make it into the top 6. Because as you say, it's just a set of games that you don't really want to be involved in. It's, as you say, just limping to the end of the season.
It's grim. I love the split. I'm one of the few people I think in Scottish football, I think the split's a good thing, because we could have got pulled into it. It could have made the end of the season could have been really exciting, because there's a few teams could have got sucked into that playoff. And then the top end of the table, you've got teams fighting for Europe. This season's a bit of an anomaly. You've got teams cut adrift at either end. So normally a fan of the split, but this season it feels like a bit of a damp squib.
Just because we're on the wrong end of it.
It sucks.
But David Gray, as I mentioned, he's in the dugout for the remainder of the season. Hibs legend, isn't he, because of the goal in the cup final. But what can we expect from Hibs coming to the Tony Macaroni Arena at the weekend? Is there a particular players that he's kind of gone back to since he's come back into the dugout? Any change in setup, any shape or anything like that?
He went 2 up top on Saturday. So he played Melkerson up with James Scott. And to be fair, the St-Mirren goalie could almost have taken the day off, which has been the theme for us this season. So you might find your goalkeeper who takes like a wee deck chair with him if it's a nice day on Saturday, can have a wee sit down in the sun. I'm not sure. David Gray, we didn't show much on Saturday. The St-Mirren game was the highlight was a couple of guys swearing behind the Hibs TV commentators that was getting picked up on the mic. That was probably the best bit. When they showed the highlight package on YouTube, there was like a throw in, there was a lad eating a pie, somebody nearly tripped up going up the stairs. That's the sort of game that it was. There was a seagull went on the pitch at one point, and that was it. And then we got a goal. And other than that, nothing really happened. And there's a good chance that we'll get the same again on Saturday.
We're in for an absolute thrill night if a seagull turns up on the artificial pitch at Livy. God, can't wait for it. We will with the entrance fee, that alone. But kind of looking towards next season, obviously a lot will depend on the manager situation, who comes in. But is it a big rebuilding job you think needs done at Hibs?
Yeah, it probably is. It's a difficult one to call, because if you take the line of thinking that the manager was the issue, then we probably signed enough players in January that we'll need a couple in the summer, and they'll play well, because with the right manager there. If you take the view that actually the players weren't good enough that were brought in January, then we're in a lot of trouble. We need a lot of surgery in the summer window. So, it's a toss of a coin which one of those lines of thought is correct. I have no idea. So, I think it's mental, because it should never have been a rebuild. We finished 3rd last season, cup final, cup semi-final. It's a really good season. All we really needed to do is consolidate that and get a couple of really good quality players in to support it, and try to keep Martin Boyle all season. That probably would have helped as well. But as it was, we didn't sign who we needed to sign, and now it just feels that we've got kind of square pegs and round holes, to coin a phrase. Yeah,
how big a loss has Martin Boyle been?
Huge. We were a one-man team for a large chunk of last season. We had Nisbet, Doidge and Boyle got 50-odd goals between them last season. This season, Doidge has been injured, Nisbet's been injured and off form, so we were relying on Martin Boyle to get the goals, and he's still our top scorer, and he's not kicked the ball for Hibs since January. I think our next top scorer is maybe Melkerson on 2, or Kyle McGuinness. Kyle McGuinness, I think, got 4, and he's been injured since September.
Yeah.
So it tells you the problems that Hibs have had. Martin Boyle was huge for us.
Yeah. So looking at the game on Saturday, Matty, what's your prediction for it? I'm going to assume you're not going to be particularly positive for this game, Matty.
I think it'll be 0-0 with both teams lucky to get 0. I see it going, or it'll be. I don't know. Livingston have had their number this season. Even the game at Easter Road, I think we were 2-0 up, and then ended up losing 3-2. And Jack Ross came at a sticky end after losing at Livingston. So I wouldn't bet against a Livingston win for it. When I do my podcast, I'll say Hibs will win 2-0, something like that. I'll be dead bullish about it, but honestly, it'll either be 0-0 or a goal either way. It's just one of those. Either team could win it. Yeah.
Well, Matty, you obviously present the Longbangers podcast. For any of our listeners that want to tune in, where can they find you? Where can they find you on social media as well?
Twitter, we're at Longbangers. We also have Instagram, but actually do very little on that, so I wouldn't bother there. Same also with Facebook, it's there, but we don't do much. So Twitter is where it's happening. And then we're across all the usual podcast players, and we do extra content if anybody wants to tune in. So it's not all football, we do comedy and some mental health stuff. You can subscribe to that at longbangers.hubwave.net. £3 a month. It's less than a price of coffee. It's well worth it.
I couldn't agree more. Some of the content you produce is very, very good. But no, Matty, thank you for coming back on the podcast. Obviously, you were in a bit higher spirits last time when we had you on because Maloney had just been appointed and it's that new manager bounce. It's frightening the difference 120 days can make, isn't it?
Easy, I've turned a drink now. But what can you do?
But no, thank you so much for coming back on, and best of luck for the remainder of the season.
Thanks, you and you too. Cheers, mate.
That's it for this week's episode of Talk Livi. Thanks again to every single one of you for tuning in, week out. And if you can, we'd love to hear your feedback. Either leave us a review on iTunes or simply message us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram.
As Euan said, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Search Talk Livi to find us. You'll find all the links to our weekly episodes on there as well. You can also find all our episodes, including this one, on all good podcast streaming sites, including iTunes and Spotify. We're also on YouTube, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If none of those options suit you, all you have to do is head to our website, talklivipodcast.libsyn.com, where you find every single episode we've done over the last few years.
That's it for this week, but thanks to all our listeners for tuning in once again. Let's hope for another great week following the Lothian's finest football team.
West Lothian is our battle cry. This is the place from which we hail. Livingston, oh Livingston, it's up to Amberville. Livingston, 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 oh Livingston. We love it when you score. Livingston, oh Livingston, the Amberville Lions roar. Livingston, oh Livingston, we realize our vision. Livingston, oh Livingston, into the